Layti and the Arcturian Council reveal the gamma wave from the Galactic Core. Earth's hidden matrix trembles as trapped energies break, and the crystalline grid opens humanity's forbidden door of light. The wave does not come to end the world. It comes to end the lie that humanity was born to live imprisoned inside fear. I am Layti, speaking with the Arcturian Council, and I bring this transmission with the gravity it deserves. A force from the Galactic Core is moving through the unseen corridors of creation, and Earth is not outside its reach. This is not a spectacle for restless minds. This is not another prediction designed to feed panic. This is not a promise that the sky will open and remove responsibility from the human being. This is a confrontation. A gamma wave of living light is pressing toward Earth's field, carrying a level of intelligence that does not negotiate with distortion. It does not need permission from the old matrix. It does not ask the false structures of control whether they are ready to be seen. It does not bow before the fear programs humanity inherited, obeyed, defended, and passed from generation to generation as though they were natural law. It arrives as pressure, and pressure reveals. What was hidden under spiritual language will be exposed. What was buried inside the body will rise. What was disguised as normal life will begin to look like captivity. What was called responsibility, but was actually exhaustion, will lose its sacred mask. What was called peace, but was actually silence under control, will begin to crack. What was called maturity, but was only numb obedience, will no longer hold the soul in place. This is why the first movement of the wave may not feel peaceful. When greater light enters a system trained to survive in darkness, the darkness reacts. Not because it is stronger, but because it has been discovered. The old matrix trembles when the human being begins to see that the prison was never only outside. It was also in the reflex, in the fear before speaking, in the guilt before choosing, in the habit of shrinking before authority, in the silent agreement to continue living half awake because waking fully would require the end of an identity. You must understand this clearly. The matrix is not only a structure around humanity. It is a pattern inside humanity. It is the invisible architecture that teaches a person to mistrust the soul, abandon the body, divide the mind, suppress the heart, and call that fragmentation life. It teaches humans to look outward for enemies while ignoring the agreements that keep the inner temple occupied by fear. Now the gamma wave enters, not to flatter the spiritual ego, not to create chosen ones, not to make humanity worship another cosmic event. It enters to reveal what cannot pass into the crystalline order of life. The crystalline grid is not a fantasy floating above Earth. It is a corrected pattern of existence. It is what becomes available when human beings stop feeding the hologram of separation through fear, resentment, self-betrayal, and false devotion. It is not built by words alone. It is not entered through imagination alone. It forms through coherence, through truth, through service without performance, through love that does not collapse, through faith that does not become blindness, through a body that no longer carries the prison as though it were home. I speak now to those who have felt the pressure before they had language for it. You may have sensed that the old rhythm no longer receives you. You may have felt that something in your life is too small, not because your life lacks value, but because the inner structure you once used to survive can no longer contain what is awakening beneath it. You may have felt alone among people, displaced inside familiar rooms, unable to return to conversations that once seemed harmless. You may have wondered whether something was wrong with you. No. Something is being reorganized. The trapped energies are not rising to destroy you. They are rising because the body can no longer remain a storage chamber for histories the soul has outgrown. The buried grief, the inherited fear, the silent compromises, the unfinished truths, the shame that never belonged to you, the anger you swallowed to remain acceptable, the love you twisted into obedience, all of it begins to move when a higher intelligence enters the field. Do not turn this into fear. Fear is the language of the matrix. Clarity is the language of the wave. The old matrix wants you terrified by exposure. The Arcturian field asks you to become precise with it. If something rises, observe it. If something cracks, ask what it was holding together. If a false role dissolves, do not rush to replace it with another mask. If the body speaks, listen. If the mind becomes crowded, return it to truth. If the heart trembles, do not force it open with spiritual violence. Let it thaw under the authority of God. Because the final key was never hidden in complexity. The higher teaching across the living worlds remains simple, but no civilization can truly receive it while worshipping fear. Love God with the whole heart, the whole mind, and the whole soul. Not as a slogan. Not as religious decoration. Not as a sentence repeated while the life remains divided. As an inner government. As the return of authority. As the end of the false throne. The gamma wave does not ask humanity to escape Earth. It asks humanity to stop carrying the prison inside the human vessel. The gamma wave from the Galactic Core. The Galactic Core is not only a distant center in the language of this transmission. It is the symbolic furnace of remembrance. It is the womb of ordering light, the place from which intelligence moves not as noise, but as command. When I speak of the gamma wave from the Galactic Core, I do not speak as one delivering a measurement for your laboratories. I speak as one naming a spiritual pressure moving through the architecture of Earth's consciousness. This wave carries a sharper light than humanity is accustomed to receiving. Not brighter in the way a lamp is bright. Sharper in the way truth is sharp. It does not enter to decorate belief. It enters to divide what is living from what is repeated. It does not ask what humanity has called normal. It asks what humanity has allowed to become normal because it feared the consequences of truth. Earth has been surrounded by noise for a long cycle. Outer noise, yes, but also internal noise, reaction, distraction, exhaustion, spectacle, inherited conflict, the endless hunger to be told what reality is before the soul is permitted to sense it directly. This noise has functioned like a veil, not because humanity lacks divine origin, but because attention has been captured, scattered, and trained to obey every impulse except the quiet current of source. The gamma wave pierces noise. That is why the old matrix cannot welcome it. A control matrix survives by managing perception. It does not need to chain every hand if it can chain the meaning of life. It does not need to imprison every body if it can teach the human being to fear freedom. It does not need to silence every voice if it can make truth feel dangerous before it is spoken. It does not need to destroy the soul if it can convince the personality to live without consulting it. But the wave carries memory, and memory is dangerous to false systems. When humanity remembers that fear is not the highest law, the matrix loses authority. When humanity remembers that love is not weakness, the matrix loses fuel. When humanity remembers that the body is not a machine for survival but a temple of reception, the matrix loses access. When humanity remembers that God is not distant from the human breath, the old hologram begins to tremble. This trembling may be subtle at first. A person may suddenly notice how often their choices are shaped by fear of judgment. Another may realize that the life they defended is built around avoiding a truth they already know. Another may feel that the spiritual words they repeat no longer satisfy because the soul is asking for embodiment, not performance. Another may see that their exhaustion is not weakness, but the cost of obeying a rhythm that was never sacred. These are not small signs. The wave enters civilization through the human being. Not only through skies, fields, or cosmic alignments, but through attention, through conscience, through the sudden inability to continue a lie, through the body refusing to carry another layer of unspoken grief, through the mind becoming tired of false complexity, through the heart beginning to recognize that love without truth becomes captivity. The Galactic Core sends not comfort first, but correction. And correction, when it meets a wounded world, can sound like thunder inside silence. Why Earth's hidden matrix begins to tremble. The hidden matrix does not tremble because humans shout against it. It trembles when humans stop feeding it unconsciously. This distinction matters. Many believe the matrix is defeated by anger, rebellion, constant exposure, argument, and obsession with outer enemies. But whatever receives your obsessive attention continues to receive your life force. A person can condemn control while remaining controlled by the emotional shape of the fight. A person can denounce fear while transmitting fear. A person can speak of liberation while becoming dependent on the drama of imprisonment. The hidden matrix knows how to survive opposition. It does not know how to survive coherence. Coherence is the end of its access. When the gamma wave touches the planetary field, it presses against every place where humanity's energy has been divided. Divided speech, divided devotion, divided identity, divided love, divided conscience. The old matrix is built from division. It teaches the heart to desire one thing, the mind to believe another, the body to endure another, and the soul to remain silent beneath all of it. That fragmentation is the prison. A human being divided against himself can be directed from outside. A humanity divided against itself can be governed through fear, scarcity, outrage, pride, guilt, and false belonging. But a human being returning to inner alignment becomes difficult to manipulate. Not impossible to influence, not perfect, not beyond error, but no longer easily possessed. This is why the wave creates pressure inside private life. You may see old patterns becoming intolerable. You may notice that certain conversations no longer feel merely unpleasant, but spiritually expensive. You may sense that you cannot continue feeding relationships where your soul must disappear to maintain harmony. You may feel a growing refusal to participate in fear-based rituals of attention. You may discover that what once entertained you now drains you, and what once impressed you now feels hollow. The matrix trembles when appetite changes. Because the old system feeds through appetite. Appetite for distraction, validation, outrage, superiority, rescue, certainty, numbness, conflict, and spectacle. If your appetite is redirected toward truth, silence, grounded love, reverence, and clean action, the old matrix loses a gate into your life. Do not underestimate this. The greatest collapse of control does not always begin with visible revolution. Sometimes it begins when one person no longer laughs at cruelty. When one person refuses to lie to remain accepted. When one person stops calling anxiety intuition. When one person returns attention to God before the world can colonize the morning. When one person listens to the body instead of using the body as an instrument of endless survival. This is the quiet apocalypse. Not fire falling from the sky, but falsehood losing the right to remain hidden. The word apocalypse means unveiling, and that is what the gamma wave brings. It unveils the machinery beneath the habits. It unveils the fear beneath the opinions. It unveils the wound beneath the reaction. It unveils the spiritual pride beneath the beautiful language. It unveils the false love beneath the sacrifice that has become resentment. The matrix trembles because the human being begins to see. And once a human truly sees, obedience is never the same. The first sign will be exposure, not peace. Many wait for peace as proof that light has arrived. But the first sign is often exposure. This is the part of the transmission that must be spoken without softness. Humanity has misunderstood light because it has often wanted light to soothe without revealing, bless without correcting, comfort without cleansing. But true light does not flatter the wound. It does not make the prison more beautiful. It does not decorate denial. It exposes what cannot continue. When the gamma wave enters a human system, it may first illuminate what the person has avoided. Not to humiliate them, to liberate them. The anger stored behind politeness. The grief buried beneath productivity. The resentment hidden inside service. The fear disguised as control. The jealousy hidden beneath spiritual language. The exhaustion called duty. The obedience called loyalty. The numbness called peace. Exposure can feel like chaos because the personality loses its ability to maintain the old image. Suddenly, the inner contradictions become visible. A person who thought they were peaceful sees how much conflict they suppress. A person who thought they were loving sees where love has become dependency. A person who thought they were free sees where approval still governs the nervous system. A person who thought they trusted God sees where they only trust outcomes they can predict. This is a sacred embarrassment. Do not run from it. The matrix survives through unexamined shame. It convinces people that seeing their distortion means they are unworthy. This is false. Seeing distortion means light has reached the place where transformation becomes possible. The danger is not exposure. The danger is defending what has been exposed. If you defend the old wound, it becomes identity. If you witness it with humility, it becomes material for liberation. This is why the wave may cause relationships to reveal their true structure, not through forced drama, but through clarity. Some connections will deepen because truth is finally allowed to enter. Others will weaken because they were built on performance. Some people will not understand the change in you. Some may call your clarity distance. Some may call your boundary coldness. Some may call your silence pride because they benefited from your self-abandonment. Do not become cruel. But do not return to the cage just because someone decorated it with the word love. The first exposure must be handled with dignity. You are not being asked to accuse everyone. You are not being asked to abandon every structure of your life. You are being asked to stop lying inside it. That is different. A person can remain in a home, a job, a relationship, a city, a role, and still undergo a radical shift because the inner consent has changed. The gamma wave does not always remove you from the location. It removes false authority from the location. You begin to see what is yours to carry and what was assigned to you by fear. You begin to see which duties are sacred and which are inherited chains. You begin to see where compassion is real and where it has been used to keep you available to distortion. You begin to see that peace cannot be built on buried truth. So when exposure comes, breathe. Do not dramatize every revelation. Do not make a new identity out of being purified. Do not punish yourself for having been human. Let the light do its work. Let what was hidden be named. Let what is named be released. Let what is released make room for a cleaner life. The wave does not expose to destroy. It exposes because heaven cannot enter a room where every door is blocked by what you refuse to see. The trapped energies inside the human body. The body has carried what history refused to heal. Your body is not merely flesh. It is a record of obedience and resistance, tenderness and impact, fear and survival, love and absence. It remembers tones of voice, rooms of pressure, moments of silence, grief never spoken, anger swallowed too early, instincts denied, prayers whispered through exhaustion. The mind may explain the past, but the body continues to hold what explanation did not release. This is why the gamma wave must pass through the body. Not because the body is inferior, because the body is the altar where hidden truth becomes visible. The source speaks of trapped traumatic energies that must be released from the body, so light can flow through conscious beings and connect properly with Earth. Hear this with wisdom. This does not mean every discomfort is cosmic. This does not mean neglect care, medicine, therapy, rest, or practical support. It means the body is part of spiritual transformation, and no true crystalline order can be embodied while the body remains treated as a storage chamber for fear. Many humans have used spirituality to rise away from the body. They speak of dimensions, councils, waves, frequencies, and cosmic events while ignoring the breath that is shallow, the shoulders that remain armored, the stomach that tightens at truth, the jaw that holds unspoken sentences, the hands that grip control, the fatigue that begs for mercy. I say this with precision. If light does not reach the body, it remains incomplete. The old matrix needs disembodied spirituality. It wants humans who speak of liberation but cannot inhabit themselves. It wants seekers who chase signs but ignore the nervous system. It wants people who claim cosmic mission but cannot rest, listen, apologize, or set a clean boundary. It wants the soul floating above the ground because an ungrounded soul is easier to manipulate. The gamma wave reverses this. It presses light downward, into the breath, into the bones, into the hidden contraction, into the inherited command that says, "Do not speak," into the ancient fear that says, "Do not trust," into the grief that says, "Do not feel," into the shame that says, "Do not be seen," into the exhaustion that says, "Keep carrying it or you will lose love." These commands are not your origin. They are programs. When they begin to loosen, the body may tremble in subtle ways. Not always physically, but existentially. The person realizes they no longer want to carry the same emotional weight. They no longer want to perform strength while internally collapsing. They no longer want to betray the body to satisfy systems that never ask whether the soul is alive. This is where the forbidden door begins to appear. It is not forbidden by God. It is forbidden by the matrix. It is the door into embodied freedom. The door through which a human being stops using the body as a prison and begins treating it as a temple of reception. A temple must be cleared, not violently, not with hatred, with reverence. Rest may become spiritual work. Truthful speech may become spiritual work. Crying without shame may become spiritual work. Eating without contempt may become spiritual work. Saying no without guilt may become spiritual work. Standing barefoot on earth and remembering that you are not separate from creation may become spiritual work. The body is where the matrix hid many of its commands. The wave is where those commands begin to lose authority. The old hologram of control starts to crack. The old hologram is smooth until light touches it. A hologram of control does not survive by looking like a prison. It survives by looking like reality. It teaches generations to accept certain limits as natural, certain fears as intelligent, certain forms of exhaustion as honorable, certain patterns of separation as inevitable. It becomes the background. And once control becomes background, people stop questioning it. They simply live inside it. This is why the cracking of the hologram can feel disorienting. When a person has spent years navigating illusion, the first glimpse beyond it may not produce celebration. It may produce grief. Because the person realizes how much life force was spent maintaining something false. How many choices were made from fear? How many relationships were shaped by self-abandonment? How much spiritual hunger was misdirected into distraction? Do not turn this grief into despair. Grief is often the sound of truth returning to a place that was numb. The hologram cracks first at the points of contradiction, where society speaks of freedom while cultivating dependency, where communities speak of love while punishing authenticity, where spiritual circles speak of unity while secretly competing for importance, where families speak of loyalty while demanding silence, where individuals speak of faith while organizing every decision around fear. The gamma wave enters these contradictions. It does not need to attack them. It makes them visible. This is why so many old narratives become unstable during periods of increased light. They must repeat themselves more aggressively because repetition is the only power they have left. The old hologram cannot evolve into truth. It can only defend illusion more loudly. You will see this externally. But again, I direct you inward. Where do you defend your personal hologram? Where do you keep repeating a story because without it you would have to change? Where do you say, "This is just how I am," when the truth is that you have not yet released a survival strategy? Where do you call something destiny because you fear the responsibility of choice? Where do you call something spiritual guidance because you are afraid to sit in uncertainty? The cracking of the hologram is not only collective. It is intimate. A person may wake to the realization that their entire sense of identity was built around being needed. Another may see that their ambition was not born from purpose, but from the fear of being unseen. Another may realize their anger protected a sorrow they never honored. Another may discover that their spiritual certainty was covering a lack of trust. This is not failure. This is the old image breaking. And when the image breaks, the true face can begin to breathe. The crystalline grid does not require humanity to become perfect. It requires humanity to become less false. Perfection is another mask. Coherence is different. Coherence allows the human being to say, "I see where I have been afraid. I see where I have been divided. I see where I have performed light while protecting darkness. I see where I have called the cage home." That sentence terrifies the old matrix. Because the moment a human sees the cage must work harder to remain believable. Why light workers feel removed from the old frequency? Those who came to hold light may feel removed from the old rhythm before they understand why. I speak now to the ones who feel strangely separated from what once pulled them easily. Not because you hate the world. Not because you are above humanity. Not because you have been chosen to escape. But because the inner frequency of your consent is changing. There are people who can no longer feed on noise. They can no longer pretend that cruelty is entertainment. They can no longer enter conversations that turn fear into identity. They can no longer force the body into endless productivity without hearing the soul protest. They can no longer use spiritual language to avoid practical truth. They can no longer live as though God is a concept to discuss rather than the center to obey. This can feel lonely. The old matrix offers belonging through agreement. It says, repeat the fear and you will belong. Repeat the outrage and you will belong. Repeat the role and you will belong. Repeat the silence and you will belong. Repeat the spiritual language of your group and you will belong. But the wave begins to break false belonging. This is why some light workers feel out of place even among those who use the same words. Because vocabulary is not the same as coherence. A person can say light and transmit pressure. A person can say love and demand obedience. A person can say truth and carry cruelty. A person can say awakening and still be addicted to superiority. The Arcturian field does not measure by vocabulary. It measures by coherence. Can you remain humble when corrected? Can you hold sensitivity without becoming chaotic? Can you speak truth without humiliating others? Can you love without dissolving your boundaries? Can you serve without secretly begging for recognition? Can you perceive distortion without becoming consumed by it? This is the refinement of the light worker. Many of you have thought your task was to announce the light. Now you are learning that your task is to become a place where the light does not become distorted when it passes through. That is harder. It asks for maturity. It asks for discipline. It asks for emotional honesty. It asks for the end of spiritual performance. The wave will strip performance from the work. This is mercy. A performed light cannot stabilize a trembling world. A dramatic light cannot hold space during exposure. A prideful light cannot enter the crystalline grid without fracturing. Humanity does not need spiritual actors. Humanity needs coherent vessels. This may require your life to become simpler. Less noise, less proving, less urgency, less hunger to be recognized as special, more truth, more rest, more service that no one sees, more prayer without spectacle, more love in the places where your actual life tests you. The old frequency depends on performance. The new pattern depends on embodiment. If you feel removed from the old frequency, do not rush to fill the space with another identity. Let the silence teach you. Let the loneliness become clean instead of bitter. Let your service become quieter and stronger. Let God remove from your hands what your ego wanted to display, so your soul can carry what your life is truly meant to anchor. You are not here to escape humanity. You are here to stop transmitting the old prison through a spiritual voice. The crystalline grid beneath the chaos. Beneath the chaos, a different order is forming. The crystalline grid is not born from panic. It is not built by fear. It is not strengthened by predictions, superiority, or spiritual spectacle. It is formed through coherence. the kind of coherence that appears when a human being stops dividing life into sacred language and unconscious behavior. The grid is not elsewhere. It begins where truth enters action. A clean decision strengthens it. A prayer spoken from sincerity strengthens it. A body treated with reverence strengthens it. A relationship purified by honesty strengthens it. A boundary set without hatred strengthens it. A moment of refusing to spread fear strengthens it. A person returning attention to source instead of feeding the machinery of panic strengthens it. This is why the crystalline grid cannot be understood only as cosmic geometry. It is also moral geometry. Every distortion bends the field. Every coherent action restores a line. When millions of humans live divided, the planetary pattern becomes unstable. When humans begin returning to truth in ordinary ways, the field receives new structure. The old matrix is a web of unconscious agreements. The crystalline grid is a network of conscious alignment. This is not abstract. It is practical. When you stop speaking words you do not mean, a line clears. When you stop pretending peace while resentment grows, a line clears. When you stop feeding your attention to what makes you less human, a line clears. When you forgive without denying truth, a line clears. When you admit fear without worshiping it, a line clears. When you love God more than the approval of the matrix, a line clears. The chaos is not the final state. It is the turbulence of transition between patterns. One pattern is built on control. The other is built on coherence. One teaches the human being to survive by fragmentation. The other teaches the human being to live through alignment. One requires fear to remain believable. The other requires truth to become embodied. This is why the wave must expose. You cannot build a crystalline structure on hidden rot. The foundation must be seen. The old emotional debris must be lifted. The false agreements must be named. The body must be included. The mind must be purified. The heart must be strengthened. The soul must return to source. The crystalline grid is not a reward for spiritual imagination. It is the architecture that becomes possible when humanity stops treating God as distant and begins allowing the living source to reorganize the human vessel from within. This is the great reversal. The old matrix said, "The outer world defines your inner reality." The crystalline grid says, "The inner alignment determines what can enter the outer field." The old matrix said, "Fear keeps you safe." The crystalline grid says, "Truth guided by love makes you free." The old matrix said, "You are alone, so obey." The crystalline grid says, "You belong to source, so stand." The wave is opening the forbidden door not because humanity earned a spectacle, but because enough pressure has gathered to reveal what can no longer remain hidden. The door is forbidden only to the false self. The soul recognizes it. The body may tremble before it. The mind may question it. The heart may weep before it. But the door is real. And it opens wherever a human being becomes too honest to remain a servant of the old hologram. The forbidden door humanity was not ready to open. The forbidden door is not in the sky. It is in the human being. For ages, humanity has waited for external doors, a door of rescue, a door of proof, a door of sudden planetary transformation, a door of judgment, a door through which the worthy are taken away and the rest are left in confusion. But the deepest door has always been internal, and this is why the Matrix worked so hard to keep humanity distracted from it. The forbidden door opens when the human being stops defending separation. This door was not forbidden by heaven. It was forbidden by fear. Forbidden by systems that needed humans divided against themselves. Forbidden by inherited shame. Forbidden by false authorities. Forbidden by spiritual immaturity. Forbidden by the belief that God could be loved with words while fear continued ruling the secret places. Behind this door is not fantasy. Behind it is responsibility. That is why humanity resisted it. Many say they want light, but what they want is relief. Many say they want truth, but what they want is confirmation. Many say they want freedom, but what they want is a more beautiful identity inside the same prison. Many say they want God, but they want God to bless the structures they refuse to surrender. The forbidden door opens only when the human being becomes willing to be changed. Not entertained. Changed. This is where the gamma wave becomes apocalyptic in its true sense. It unveils the cost of remaining false. It shows that there is no spiritual future built on self-betrayal. No crystalline order built on fear. No higher field stabilized by pride. No kingdom entered through performance. No freedom possible while the human being keeps feeding the prison with attention, obedience, and silence. The door asks one question in many forms. Will you continue protecting what keeps you divided? For one person, this question appears as a relationship they must finally see clearly. For another, it appears as a habit of fear they must stop calling wisdom. For another, it appears as a body that can no longer endure the pace of self-abandonment. For another, it appears as a spiritual identity that must be humbled. For another, it appears as the need to forgive, not to excuse, but to stop allowing the past to own the inner field. For another, it appears as a call back to God after years of using spiritual concepts to avoid surrender. The door is not opened by force. It opens through consent. But not the old corrupted consent. Not the yes spoken from fear. Not the yes spoken to be loved. Not the yes spoken to avoid rejection. The door opens through the clean consent of the soul. I am willing to live without the lie. That sentence carries power. The old matrix fears it because the lie is the central mechanism of control. Not one lie only, but the entire habit of lying to oneself. The lie that fear is safer than faith. The lie that exhaustion is proof of worth. The lie that silence is always peace. The lie that love requires self-abandonment. The lie that the body is only a burden. The lie that God is far away. The lie that humanity cannot change. The forbidden door opens when the lie loses worship. And beyond it, the human being does not become less human. The human being becomes finally inhabited. The highest teaching hidden in the wave. At the center of this entire transmission is a teaching so ancient that many overlook its force. Love God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul. You have heard similar words before, but many have not understood them as cosmic technology. This teaching is not merely devotional. It is structural. It describes the complete return of the human system to source. It is the end of fragmentation. It is the correction of the inner throne. To love God with the whole heart is to stop allowing fear, resentment, attachment, and guilt to govern love. It is to let the heart become brave enough to feel without becoming captive, tender enough to forgive without denying truth, strong enough to set boundaries without hatred, open enough to receive without suspicion. To love God with the whole mind is to stop allowing confusion to wear the crown. It is to purify attention, to question thoughts that serve fear, to refuse both blind belief and cold cynicism, to let intelligence bow to truth without surrendering discernment. A mind that loves God does not become empty, it becomes clear. To love God with the whole soul is to return identity to its origin. It is to stop being defined by wounds, roles, labels, histories, spiritual titles, failures, or achievements. It is to remember that before every mask, every assignment, every pain, every human name, there is belonging to the living source. This is the kingdom, not a distant location, not an escape from earth, not a reward for performance. The kingdom is the inner order that appears when God becomes central again in the human vessel. This is why the old matrix hates this teaching when it is lived, not merely spoken. A person who loves God with the whole heart cannot be ruled indefinitely by guilt. A person who loves God with the whole mind cannot be easily hypnotized by noise. A person who loves God with the whole soul cannot be owned by any false identity. The gamma wave comes to make this teaching unavoidable. It brings pressure to the heart, so false love is exposed. It brings pressure to the mind, so fear-based thought is exposed. It brings pressure to the soul, so borrowed identities are exposed. It brings pressure to the body, so stored commands of survival are exposed. It brings pressure to earth, so the old hologram of separation is exposed. The teaching is simple because truth is simple at its core. But simple does not mean easy. To love God completely is to stop negotiating with the inner structures that keep God secondary. It is to stop using spiritual language while fear remains the hidden authority. It is to stop asking heaven to bless the cage. You cannot enter the kingdom while defending the prison. This is the secret hidden in the wave. The gamma light is not merely bringing information. It is bringing a demand for integrity. It asks humanity to become capable of carrying what it claims to desire. It asks light workers to stop performing light. It asks the wounded to stop worshiping the wound. It asks the strong to stop using strength as armor. It asks the fearful to stop calling fear truth. It asks the spiritual to become real. And when this teaching is lived, the forbidden door opens without spectacle. A person becomes quieter, but stronger, humbler, but clearer, more human but less controlled, more surrendered, but more responsible. This is not the end of life on earth. It is the end of living on earth as though heaven never touched the human breath. The moment earth stops obeying the false matrix, earth stops obeying the false matrix one human at a time. Not in a single dramatic moment that removes all responsibility. Not through one visible event that forces every soul into clarity. Not through fear. Not through superiority. Not through spiritual spectacle. The old matrix ends whenever its commands no longer find a home inside the human being. This is the great reversal. For ages, humanity has believed that outer systems must change first before inner freedom can be real. But the matrix survives because inner consent feeds outer continuity. The moment inner consent changes, the outer structure begins losing invisible support. This does not mean external action is unnecessary. It means external action must be born from coherence, not reaction. A frightened revolution repeats the pattern it opposes. A hateful truth becomes another blade. A spiritual movement built on pride becomes another hierarchy. A freedom movement without inner purification becomes another prison with different symbols. The wave is asking for something higher. It asks for humans who can act without hatred, speak without distortion, refuse without cruelty, serve without self-erasure, discern without paranoia, love without blindness, pray without escaping responsibility, stand without needing to dominate. This is the kind of humanity the old matrix cannot digest, because such humans do not feed the old mechanisms. They do not give attention to every manufactured fear. They do not let outrage become identity. They do not let guilt replace guidance. They do not let spiritual language excuse immaturity. They do not abandon earth while speaking of heaven. They become living contradictions to the hologram. And when enough living contradictions appear, the hologram loses credibility. Earth herself responds to coherence. Your planet is not dead matter beneath your feet. She is a living field, patient beyond human comprehension, carrying the weight of human forgetting while still offering ground, breath, food, beauty, and gravity. The wave does not bypass Earth. It asks humanity to reconnect with Earth as sacred participant, not background. The crystalline grid cannot be anchored by humans who despise embodiment. It requires those who understand that the sacred must enter daily conduct. How you speak matters. How you eat matters. How you rest matters. How you treat those with less power matters. How you handle conflict matters. How you use attention matters. How you return to God after distraction matters. This is where Earth stops obeying the false matrix. When sacredness is no longer postponed. When God is no longer reduced to an idea. When the body is no longer treated as a machine. When love is no longer confused with captivity. When truth is no longer delayed until everyone approves. When light is no longer performed, but lived. The gamma wave is not coming to make humanity vanish. It is coming to make false humanity impossible to maintain. The human being who emerges from this passage will not be flawless, but they will be harder to deceive, harder to divide, harder to shame into silence, harder to seduce into fear, harder to separate from source. This is the apocalyptic mercy of the wave. It does not destroy the earth. It destroys the right of the lie to remain unquestioned. The wave does not come to end the world. It comes to end the inner agreement that made the world of fear feel inevitable. Now the transmission is complete enough to be carried with discernment. The gamma wave from the galactic core is not a toy for spiritual curiosity. It is not a weapon of panic. It is not a promise of escape. It is a living pressure of revelation moving toward the hidden architecture of humanity, pressing against every false structure that taught the soul to survive without truth. The old matrix trembles because the light is no longer touching only the surface. It is touching the agreements, the silent yes spoken from fear, the love twisted into obedience, the body used as a container for unprocessed pain, the mind crowded with artificial urgency, the heart trained to confuse guilt with compassion, the soul covered by roles, wounds, labels, and borrowed identities. This is why the first sign is exposure, not comfort, not immediate peace, not a beautiful escape from responsibility. Exposure. The locked rooms open. The buried energies rise. The hologram cracks. The false authority loses its smooth voice. The human being begins to see that the prison was not only built around them. Parts of it were carried within them, protected as personality, defended as realism, repeated as duty. But revelation is not condemnation. Revelation is mercy with fire. What is exposed can be released. What is released can be purified. What is purified can become a vessel. And what becomes a vessel can receive a higher order without turning it into pride, fear, or performance. This is what the crystalline grid asks of humanity. Not perfection. Coherence. A heart that does not betray love with resentment. A mind that does not surrender clarity to noise. A soul that does not forget its origin. A body that no longer carries the old prison as though it were sacred. A life that makes God visible through conduct, not only language. I am Layti, speaking with the Arcturian Council, and I tell you this with the full weight of the transmission. The forbidden door is not opening first in the sky. It is opening in the human being who finally stops defending the darkness that kept them alive and begins carrying the light that makes them free. Do not fear the pressure. Fear the lie that tells you to remain unchanged. Do not worship the wave. Become honest enough for the wave to pass through you without distortion. Do not wait for the matrix to fall in a single moment. Withdraw your life force from it every time fear asks for your obedience and truth asks for your return. The earth is not being abandoned. The human body is not being rejected. The soul is not being punished. The old hologram is being unveiled so the living creation beneath it can breathe again. And when the light enters the final locked room of humanity, the first thing it will break is not the world, but the ancient habit of calling the cage a home.